Joined by Robert Kendall of Kendall Consulting. Robert is a business coach, podcaster, writer, author, and he does the Tough Love podcast. You can go to toughlove.live to hear his podcast. Robert, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. It's so awesome to be here with you.
Man, we've had such a unique relationship in the past, and having you on the pod on our webcast here is going to be outstanding. So, Robert, what really has brought you here? What has brought you to this whole mystical expression of living who you are?
Well, it's an experience of life of not living who I am, the life of living hidden and withdrawn and scared of truly who I am. That has brought me to the experience of going from what I call a normal person. I was a normal person at 28 and then went through a lot of life-changing experiences to be who I am today.
To be who you are today is that authentic expression, and part of your journey is discovering that true authentic person, male who has female aspects to it. So what about that journey to authenticism has really helped define you?
There have been a lot of amazing experiences along the way that have defined me. I can say, 4 or 5 really stand out. The first was I went to Burning Man when I was 28 years old. There was this, I never heard of this thing called the Saturn Return until afterwards, but I was a very straight-laced, normal, yuppie, corporate America guy until I was 28. And then I went to Burning Man in 1998, and I had a spiritual awakening that there was so much more of who I was that was available that I wasn't identified with. And so I woke up to not following my father's path that was laid out for me in detail, veering off that path, and it's been a grand adventure since then.
So that grand adventure has made you a business consultant, a coach, a writer. How is it that you maintained your awakening and stayed into business?
Well, I in 1998 I went to Burning Man. 1999 I took my first personal development course. In 2004 I started a business called One Taste with a woman named Nicole Daydone, and I acted as a COO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer. I was the lead teacher. I was a coach, and we built the business from a paper napkin sketch in 2004 into an international 8-figure business when I left in 2014. And everything I learned so much along that ride of how to run a business, who to be in the world, and it was an incredible experience. So I also had to learn how to teach and how to relate and run communication courses and sexuality courses. So it was a grand adventure.
And that grand adventure created all the different opportunities to interact with people, to become a podcaster, a writer. So what is it that you podcast, and how is the writing coming along?
I've been doing a podcast for 2 years. Really, the podcast, I was done doing workshops, but I still had a platform. I still had things I wanted to say. So I just said, I'll do a podcast. I didn't know how to do it. And so I started off in my dining room in Venice Beach, California, with a horrible mic and horrible lighting. And I just started talking about topics that mattered to me: self-sabotage, jealousy, communication, intimacy. And from that podcast and the positive feedback I got and the impact I feel like I was making, I started to build a platform. And then, urgings of my fiance, the beautiful Morgan, really said to myself, okay, it's time to write a book. And so starting this year, I've been writing a book called Unhidden. It's a book for men and those confused by them. And it's really a guidebook of how lost men feel today in the 21st century, and how confusing it is to be a man, and how hard it is to relate to a man because they're confused, and hopefully give people some reality, some skills, so we can have better, more deeper, more honest relationships.
That's well put. Men are lost in this world. And one of the things we were saying before we went on is one of the few rites of passage we face is learning how to drive.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about self-sabotage, because so many people experience that. What are some of your perspectives on how it is and how we can deal with it?
Well, self-sabotage is part of our nature. So the first part is just to know that we're actually trained to self-sabotage. It's sort of like when you first learn to drive, to use your analogy, and you're on the freeway for the first time, or highway for the first time, and you've gone from the 30 miles an hour to the 55 to 60 to 70 miles an hour, and we get nervous because we're driving so fast and there's cars all around us, and a lot of us get into fender benders because we're not used to the speed, and we psych ourselves out like, we're going too fast. In our life, in our goals, in our dreams, we do the same thing. We're so used to driving the 30 miles an hour. When things start to speed up, or when we get what we want, we then will pull the ripcord because we're not used to the high speed or the high sensation. And we're very, very skilled at self-sabotaging.
Yeah, and then there's the subtle self-sabotages where we create something that we never intended, whether it's through paranoia or just using expectation and not allowing ourselves to authentically experience the growth.
Totally. And then we hire other people to help us with our self-sabotage. I don't mean like pay them, like energetically hire people. We pull because we're just not comfortable with success. We're very comfortable in today's society with being small, with being beating ourselves up, and we're not used to living at a level of success and gratitude and abundance. We're actually more comfortable with scarcity than we are with abundance. And so once we get abundance, we're like, oh, we're going to crash, or I might as well pull the parachute cord because I'd rather do it myself than have some other force happen. And so we create, we invite, we magnetize people to stop us from growing.
Yeah. And some of the tools we use as self-sabotage are shame, blame, guilt, depression, regression, and obsession.
Exactly.
How does one help understand shame, blame, and guilt as an external projection we take on as men and women, and then what we project back to others?
The first thing is awareness and acknowledgement, to do your own self-inventory, because we're like fish swimming in the ocean of shame and blame and guilt and less than. And so especially sexual shame. I've done a lot of personal work around the concept of sexual shame, and we're swimming it. And so the first thing to do is to do that inventory. And if you have trouble doing your own self-inventory, create an ally to help you with your inventory. Maybe that's a coach, a therapist, a men's group, a woman's group, all gender group, invite an enemy to give you reflection. I don't know exactly, but it's very hard to do it by yourself. But if you can create the situation where who you are is reflected, it's a powerful tool to go start your journey of self-awareness.
And this is where I tell people ceremonies where you tell your story to an element like the fire or the wind. And that's to learn who you are, because in self-discernment is truly knowing who you are. In those moments where we are coloring our experience to cover it up for whatever is there, or if we're actually trying to change ourselves by learning what is there with all the color and not trying to change what an experience was, but how it resonates to us.
Mm-hmm.
This is going in and doing that inner work. That is the great work that everyone does on themselves. It's the hardest thing because that's the alone journey. And so many men find themselves in a codependent relationship or forever in an independent relationship.
Completely. And it's because men don't think they're worthy. Or men, the good is the enemy of great. I'm going to be in a good enough relationship because it's here. Or scarcity. A woman's actually talking to me, or a woman's, agreeing to have sex with me. So I'm going to stay in this because I never know when it's going to come around again. Good is the enemy of great. We stay in our mediocrity because we don't have faith that the universe will provide the true abundance that we desire.
Yeah. So many people operate what I call in lack consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They're always in lack because their inner abundance and their inner wealth is not accepted because they've devalued themselves somehow, some way, or it was imprinted on them by their mother and father or their environment.
Completely, 100%.
So how do we take stock of ourselves? How do we create that inner process of awareness within us?
There are many forms out there, and people, I recommend try as many as you need to. to find the one that truly works for you. I'll tell you some of mine. I was always been a journaler and a writer. And when I was young, I was writing stories about my experience. I wrote a 100-page book when I was 17 to 18 called A Man of No Consequence, which is sort of my high school journey. But reading it now, it was really my way of writing things out and getting things out of my head. In my life, I've been part of 12 Steps groups. I was part of Al-Anon when I was in a codependent relationship with an alcoholic. And then for a while, I was in something called Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, SLA, which really enabled me to see different parts of myself. I've had coaches. I'm currently in therapy with a somatic therapist, a man who uses modalities such as EMDR and somatic experiencing. That's totally changed my life.
So somatic is when you're having an emotional traumatic release through tears and emotional release.
Yeah, and he's had me beat up pillows with tennis rackets. There's one that he did where I bent back on this kind of camel-like thing that opened up my chest, and all these emotions arose. So somatic therapy is amazing.
Yes, and I know a lot of people that are really advanced at myofascial release and can have full-on somatic releases with them. Mm-hmm. And when integrated correctly, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Totally, 100%.
And it comes down to trusting the space, the environment. This is why I encourage people to make moments sacred, where you're engaging that discipline, that you are in a protected space where you can trust yourself. So many people lack that inner trust.
And that's the most important thing. Most of us, take actions to belay our own personal trust. One of my favorite caveats is self-esteem is built upon esteemable acts. You build your self-esteem by doing things that you find esteemable. And that's different for every person. For me, it's going to yoga class. For me, it's telling the 100% truth to my woman, my lady, every single day, and to myself. To me, it's being honorable in my business practices and not taking shortcuts. You build self-esteem by doing the things that have you feel positive about yourself. And most of us do not have the discipline or even the awareness that, cheating or emotional cheating or eating that extra donut or all these things is really killing our self-esteem.
So self-esteem is one of those things that's gained, earned, learned, and relearned over and over and over again. And it comes down to that discipline and having daily confidence. Mm-hmm. Men have a very different process of accepting daily confidence than women do. In your view as a life coach, what is one of the prime things both men and women can do to build that daily confidence?
It's very personal. It's very customizable. I do know some basic things. So mostly, and this, I wanted to speak that I'm speaking generalities, and so I do want to acknowledge that this will not apply to some men and some women. So if I say something, just know I'm speaking in the general terms. Men pride themselves around production, their ability to produce. That could be, a job or a purpose, or they feel good when they're actually in motion. Women tend to pride themselves around attractiveness, about their ability to attract and magnetize. So if you want to build these parts of yourself to feel good about yourself, focus on the parts of your lives where you don't feel productive or where you don't feel attractive, and do the work to cut out the habits that are growth orientated, that you don't feel good about. So if for a man, for myself personally, I know obviously more about being a man since I identify as a man, is, I know going to work and working the amount of hours and producing and coming home feeling exhausted from the day is really good for my self-esteem. Every day I do the work to feel fulfilled and more in my purpose.
And finding each purpose each day is the challenge. Some people always are looking for this long-term purpose. I've always said we have many purposes, or perpai, mm-hmm. and to have our own shell that limits us is our way of deceiving ourselves. Mm-hmm. And each day that you get up, when you don't have the potential of unlimited, you aren't giving yourself the fullness of being here in the now. That's where so many people look for a mystical experience or a great life-defining experience that gives value to those moments that we are in our authentic self, creating, co-creating, doing things that are fulfilling our life. And yet vice versa, so many people out there don't even give themselves the opportunity.
I think it's the balance between the two. I'm, compared between you and me, and I've got to know you over the last 4 months. I'm more on the pragmatic scale, and you're more on the mystical scale. And so, what the thing I love about our connection and our relationship is, I am so grateful for your mystical side, because you've positively impacted my life through your wisdom, through these talks, your time with my fiance Morgan, and I don't have that skill set of mystical. I believe I've added to your life by the practical side, handling what I do for you, but it's the marriage between the two, and to invite elements into your life where you have the balance, not to get mad at the other,
No.
but to embrace and welcome and be grateful for it.
And that embracing, that's the key, where so many people won't allow their full embracing of the energy of creation and co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what stops people from having friends. I get a lot of callers who find themselves in a hermit stage.
Mm-hmm.
They've limited themselves. And after a while, when you're in that hermit stage, you lose social graces, social experience, social skills. That's something else that is just plaguing our society, the way the internet has taken over the world, Facebook, social media, so on and so forth. It has really hindered those social skills. And this is why we have podcasters, we have people like you and me out there that are trying to create something that people can find and understand. But the mystical has been one of those things that everyone searches for, no matter what religion you are or are not. It is always a second away. Now, you were talking about Burning Man. What was it that sparked you and that experience to just demand more in your life?
So Burning Man is a very funny story with several parts. So the first thing is, I was 28. I was a yuppie living in San Francisco. I worked in corporate America. I was a very set, following my father's path, in the firstborn Jewish male, a path of success and wealth and accumulation. And then I was married at the time to a woman named Carol. Carol was of a different vein, and she was in massage school at that point, trying to find her purpose. And at massage school, a friend of hers said, "Hey, do you want to go to Burning Man?" So she came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to go to Burning Man?" And I was like, the only experience of Burning Man I had was, it was for other people, those doulas and massage therapists, those hippies. That's for someone else. And the only thing I knew about Burning Man, this was 98 when it was much smaller, was this book, this picture book I'd seen where people were walking around naked, encrusted in mud. And I was like, oh, that is so not me. I am never going to go. And then when she asked, I really said yes, but for her, like to please her. So, a month later, we're driving to the desert, the fully packed SUV. We drive up. After the 6-hour drive, I get out of my car, and then all of a sudden, there was this cool breeze that came off. It was twilight, and it was dusk, and there were drums in the distance, and the words came to me that said, "You're home."
The desert welcomed you.
Yeah, I was like, "What? No. That was a wrong delivery. That wasn't me." But I listened to it. I'm like, okay, I got curious about that. And for those 4 or 5 days I was there, and the first time there, I started to see that there was a different part of myself. There was all this mystery. There was all these other things, and I gave permission for that voice to be heard, and I talked to it, and I listened to it, and my whole life was changed. From me saying yes to going to Burning Man instead of like, no, we're not going to Burning Man, to, okay, what is this voice, and what does it want to tell me, and what does it want to teach me?
And that voice that is both within you and internally and externally, that is the land, or what I call the ancestral value of each place. That's the first thing on the mystical path. That's to hear your own voice and how it relates to what's around you. Many people have gone to Burning Man or other events or concerts and have felt something very similar to that.
Mm.
That is being welcomed to a place. And you said, I feel home.
Mm-hmm.
The desert, the playa in which Burning Man is done on, is just this open, dry, baked desert. Nothing there except some tumbleweeds
Mm-hmm.
and some lizards, all dreaming beings, waiting for a bunch of people to assemble in the middle of nowhere and create a community. And community building is one of those things that has sprung up between Burning Man, Lightning in the Bottle, and a whole bunch of other ones that are out there, each having its different way of expanding and exploring, creating communities of like-minded people who share knowledge and education. That's something both you and I have had in our hearts for a long time. What is it that you can say about community building and some of the modern ways that we can work with that?
Wow. Well, I've had vast experience with community. Before that Burning Man experience, I was really used to the dynamic of two people living in a box and then producing children to form a family and then having extended family. Then after Burning Man, really dove into the San Francisco culture, which was amazing at that time. Dance parties and raves and groups and men's groups. And I eventually built a community, one in person in San Francisco around One Taste, where we lived communally first in a warehouse, then in a single room occupancy, 45 room, but then building the bigger community, the international community of all people looking for a transformation around their sexuality. And being at the center of that, meeting tens of thousands of people, all feeling some pull toward direction, some totally isolated, some happy but looking for a little bit more, was such a rich experience. And who I am grew. I was so touched by the building and the community I had.
That community that you created, we all have these desires to make bigger communities. And I know there was a side project we were both looking at that took a bunch of tiny homes and put it on a big scale.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I know that over the next couple of years I'm going to try to promote. When you have living spaces that are shared with the communal processes and the right internal governance between person and person, what they have to do for themselves and what they have to do in relation to the community. Skills that are no longer taught by mother and father.
Completely. I love who I am. I love my relationship. I love where we live. And we live in a gated community in the valley of Los Angeles. We don't talk to our neighbors very much. We went out to a friend's house for dinner last night and sat around the table, four of us just talking and sharing stories. There was such depth to it. And that's a rare thing. And so both Morgan and I both want to create something where it's not so isolated. And because we missed the human interaction, our girls were raising 7 and 9. Their ability to learn from so many different adults would be such a benefit, to be loved by so many. And that's something we are interested in creating.
Yeah, so community creation, that's one of those things we all have to keep inside our heart and know that it is the time to build them now. So on your journey to create your book that you're working on, what is it that you see as the big change for men in general over the next couple years, culturally, coming from the technology as well as the projections?
Well, the first thing I want to say is it's really messy out there. It's complicated. There's a lot of confusion, and it's getting worse, and it's getting much worse. There's a lot of changes and dynamics between men and women. People are getting married later, having kids later, if at all. There's stories from Japan where there's a growing sector of 30-year-old boys, really boys who don't want to even engage with women, focus on porn and sex dolls and technology and video games. And today's society, it's really hard. Women's pay has increased significantly with the coming of the millennials. More women are being hired than men out of college. Polarity is changing. Men are more in their feminine, women more in their masculine. It's really a total mess, and there's a lot of confusion, a lot of anger out there. So what I'm hoping to do with my book, one, is to give people reality, to show them I see you, I understand, and this is what's happening. And two, to give pragmatic tips to find out who you are, to move past our optimized social media profiles, to come out, to be rewarded, to show yourself, to be more authentic, so then you can build authentic, true relationships rather than the kind of top level, quick to exit relationships that I'm viewing today in society.
Yeah, and society is disposable relationships now because people don't, once again, have the social skills. Correspondence is texting now that actually has no meaning behind it because the next text erased what you thought about before that. And you only remember one or two words of what you actually should have remembered as a unique experience between each other.
And the Snapchat,
Right.
Snapchat's the one where you send a text and it disappears.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, like why? And the Tinder revolution, where people are like, well, I'm hit a road bump, I'm just going to go back to my Tinder, I'm going to swipe right and find someone new. There's a lack of quality in relationships I'm seeing, an increase in quantity, and we need to get back to the mix of quantity and deeper quality and deeper intimacy.
Right. And that deeper intimacy requires discipline to not pick up the Tinder, to believe in yourself and have confidence, to go out and meet people, authentically figure out who they are. Are they a match for you in some way, frequency, harmony? Is there something you have in common or disharmony that could make a potential of a great learning between each other? To become friends before you become intimate. Yeah.
Totally, 100%. 100%.
This has been around since the dawn of relationships. In the 1800s, kids had the barrel ring and a stick as their toy. What do we have today? Transformers and cell phones. Objects of distraction.
A lot of people I see have better relationships with their smartphones than they do with their partners and themselves. I mean, how many restaurants we go to that there's 4 people sitting at a table and they're looking at their phones or taking pictures of their food rather than relating to the person across from you. And it's really, that's where society's going. We need to pay attention to this. I watched in dismay, watching my kids go to the computer or want to use the phone. And then I watched in dismay at myself and how quickly I am to pull my phone out of my pocket when there's a moment of silence. And, creating new rules around myself. When, my lady enters the room, I put the phone down. When the kids want my attention, I step away from the computer so I can have more intimacy with them than I do with my electronic devices.
Right. And getting rid of our electronics devices is discipline. Turning them off in our mind. Because you can physically have them on and them not affect you. Years and years ago, when people started to have cell phones, their original argument was, I will have it for emergencies, because it was minute-to-minute calling. It's all free calling now. It's all unlimited. They don't do these crappy minute plans like they did because they realized people weren't going to pay their bills. Now that phones have evolved where everything's unlimited, we no longer use that excuse if it's only for emergencies. When it's for emergencies, it's supposed to be there. But in this modern society, they never went through that process of having to use a phone, communicate. It's always been instantly there for them. They were never at a moment where they could be on the side of the road with no way to go and call someone.
And people would prefer to text than to talk.
Yeah.
How it's now unusual for me to say, or someone to say to me, hey, can we jump on the phone? And I'm like, oh, yeah, their modality of their voice, the intonation, feeling them deeply. It's so unusual. We're so used to just texting back and forth. And I love texting. I love the convenience of it. I'm as guilty as anyone else. And it's bringing awareness of it, which is important.
Yeah. And then you have chat room habits where people hide behind the mask of anonymity.
Or use Facebook non-anonymous to get their point across and to speak without listening, to give a viewpoint without even considering someone else's viewpoint, to be right than connected.
Right. There's the old saying, you won't shout fire in a crowded movie theater, but you'll shout fire inside a Facebook chat room. You will.
in a second.
Because they don't think about the other implications that it has.
Completely and utterly.
So let's talk about some of the other things that really affect people today. That's depression, regression, and obsession. So in your view, how do people break obsession?
Well, obsession is interesting. I was educated by a woman named Eva Clay around the biological effects of obsession. And what we often do in today's society is we rip ourselves away from our desires. And then there's a biological recoil when you actually rip yourself away from things. So for me, I've been obsessed about things. I've been obsessed about work. I've been obsessed about different women in my life. And what I've learned is to listen to the tender voice of what is driving that obsession. A lot of times it's not even that person or that thing, it's something else. I want to be seen, I want to be known, I want to be loved. And we put ourselves in situations where we don't give ourselves the time to listen to those voices. So the main thing is if you're obsessed about something, to me it's a communication from the world that there's a voice inside of you that's not being listened to.
Now, the antithesis of obsession is depression.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see depression in the way modern psychology deals with it versus some of the natural ways, such as somatic release?
What I've been taught is that depression is anger towards inward. You have external anger towards something, and instead of healthy looking at it, using that somatic release to really deal with it, you push it toward yourself. There is an abundance of self-hatred in our society. It's actually a societal norm and a societally approved action to beat yourself up, to self-flagellate yourself. And so to move through depression, deal with it. Like I said, get an ally. Don't live in isolation with your anger and depression. Don't be the hermit that you mentioned. Build some methodology so you can be seen, heard, and known.
Now, the other side of obsession and depression is regression. And this is where people always fall back to another state of their life, another version of who they were or what they were, because they don't allow full empowerment in themselves. Regression comes in many forms, and everyone does it every day, where they're confronted by a subject matter that shocks them, and they regress back to a point that can deal with the shocked energy. I see so many people that are in the 50 to 70-year-old community range that are shocked by cell phones, shocked by the way the world has changed. And they regress back to the frames of eras where they had power. And this creates great conflict between the generations.
I think, that's just an educational... There's two levels to that. One is to be okay. You have to learn to be okay with what is. There's three choices in every circumstance. One is to get in agreement with the situation, get the situation in agreement with you, or lose. Most of us pick the third. We tend to lose. And it's also very hard to get other elements in agreement with you. The simplest thing to do and the quickest way to do is to get in agreement with situation. So if you're having a generational conflict between, relating to a phone or not relating to a phone as an example, the first thing to do is to get in agreement with that's how that generation is. Instead of demanding that they change, just get into agreement. It doesn't mean you have to like it or be silent. It's just to be like, okay, this is the way it is. And then to co-create the pathway, co-create the container to find some middle ground between where they are and where you are, that you feel you're both winning and connected.
That connected and that winning aspect is co-creation, where you're allowing things to organically create and you're not controlling them with your expectations or your ability to precognify what others might do in a moment.
100%. And it's our own expectations. Expectations are very challenging things. I mean, for me, my expectations are what drive me. They're my sense of purpose. They're the roadmap. And they can also be the strongest tool in my tool belt of disconnection. If I have an expectation of how my lady will be and respond, then I'm putting my own story, my own value judgments on top of her. And that's chauvinism. That's dominance. If I can be aware of my expectations, and if my expectations don't meet, to own them, be like, wow, I just realized I had an expectation of A, B, and C. When you showed up at D, I felt loss. And I apologize for having those expectations. And her response could be like, wow, okay, what drove you to have those expectations? And then it becomes this methodology of deep intimacy. It's not a bad thing, but it can easily run askew.
I call that self-illumination, when you are really going in depth, viewing who you are, what's going in and around your life. Be willing to use hindsight so that you can have foresight, so that transformation is something you see in the moment, and that healing becomes a process and not an event in the greater expression of who we are. Just learning to let go of expectations itself gives you an organic experience and can allow some passion into your life.
Exactly. Because it clears the slate. It's like a clean blood vessel, with no plaque, so the blood and the heart can pump. It just gives you so much more freedom of life when you clear the pathway, and expectations can be the plaque that blocks the flow.
And that blocking of the flow is what so many people just don't get, is daily living. For me, that is the mystical life daily. When you are aware that you have a blockage and you consciously say, I now need to remove it. That's my responsibility to myself. That is doing the most minimal level of getting yourself out of mediocrity every day. Building that stairway out of despair, regression, obsession, shame, blame, or guilt, until such a point you've reached a frequency, a vibration, and a harmonic within yourself that passion is daily fuel.
I love that. And just to give kudos to you, sir, I watched the things you've educated Morgan and myself about, and seeing a significant difference in the relationship we have with our daughters, the significant relationship with each other, and just giving ourselves permission. So I'm a fan of your work, sir, and thank you so much for bringing it to the world.
Thank you so much. Now we have an opportunity to help some people out there of identifying some of those archetypical issues that men have when dealing with women. You were talking about, how we see women and we put ourselves in the domination and control scenario. We have the old saying, we started as cavemen, but in actuality, we were much ancient before that caveman. We go through these evolutions and de-evolutions. And we as men are in a de-evolutionary state, where I believe women are in a more evolutionary state right now. How do you see of growing philosophies that help change people? You're a writer, I'm a writer. Without discipline, you would have never gotten to the point where you're at now. So many men lack the discipline to journal. You were saying you've journaled since a young age, chronicled. One of the things that I tell people, if you are not journaling yourself, your experience daily, you are faking this experience. You are not living the mystical life. You cannot keep it all in your head. That is the ego at work.
I agree 100%. I thought when you were talking to the fundamental, people often say if you had one tip for a woman, if you had one tip for a man, what would it be? And I thought it'd be a good time to share that. The one tip for a man is to listen, and to listen deeply. And what listening to me is listening without thinking of your response in the middle of another's communication. Hearing the subtle tones, watching the facial gestures. If you're texting, feeling the feelings it evokes inside your body. Really listening deeply. Listen to the meta messages, the messages underneath the words, and really listen deeply. That's what I would recommend for men. For women, it's very different. It's to approve. To learn to approve of a man, and even if he's not acting exactly the way you want him to, approve of the fact that he's trying. Give him the space to, quote, fail, so he can be educated on how to succeed. And men are lacking a lot of approval from women. If you can approve of your man, I think he's going to try harder, be richer and smarter through your approval.
That approval process is ultimately authentic selves exchanging love without strings attached.
Mm, love that. Totally. Yeah, which goes back to the expectations. We're men are so worried about doing it right. And like I said, it's so confusing out there. The world is really changing. And these millennials, these kids are totally shaking things up, thank God, because of what was happening in the past wasn't working. Divorce rates. There are more single Americans, adult Americans now that are in couples. For the first time in history, there's more single adults than people who are paired up, which amazes me. There's divorce rates have been pretty steady, but more people are single. People are getting married much later. Things are really changing. And so to sit in the discomfort of who you are, to do that inner work, to journal, to find a therapist, to investigate who you are, you can have the life you want if you're willing to take the steps to have it.
So taking the steps is where a lot of people fail at. They don't believe in themselves. They don't do discipline. They don't make anything mean something into the moment. And because they don't do that every day, when they want to start the journey, those first few steps are the hardest. Mm-hmm. As a writer, what has kept you going? How have you maintained your passion?
I think for me, there's a few things. One is I'm constantly in my own growth cycle. Like I've been doing personal growth for 18 years, and every single day I learn something. Some days I learn major things like, whoa, I didn't know that was in there. And so for me, it's just a desire to know myself so I can be the best person I can be. The other piece of the discipline is I surround myself with people who hold me accountable. So there's different ways to do this. One, I have a partner that we're on this journey together, and she continues to reflect back to me in ways to be a better man by my request. I've asked this of her. Mm-hmm. And so she continues to just say, what about this and what about that? And we're constantly dialoguing to have things better. But you can create accountability. You can hire a coach to be accountable. Like I said, you can go to a men's group to be accountable. You can even use Facebook to hold yourself accountable. Like one time I wanted to do yoga, so I wrote on Facebook, I'm now going to do 30 days straight of yoga. And it was like day 1, awesome. Day 2, horrible. Day 3, oh my God, I'm so sore. And then by day 7, people are like, hey, Rob, did you do your yoga today? I'm like, I'm going to a class. Get off my back. But they're, asking for allies, asking for friends, asking for people to hold you accountable increases your chances highly if you do it in isolation.
Because in isolation, no one holds you accountable but yourself. And this is where complacency runs our society.
Exactly. And our ability to, you have to ask for help. And I think there's 2 levels to this. One, you have to have the courage to ask for help, which is the first step. And the second is you have to have the courage to receive the help. So often than not, I'm telling people their unwillingness to let me do something for them is them denying me the chance to love them. I love being of service to people. And when people don't ask for help, when people don't let me love them, it's a crime. And so you might want to look at all the places that the universe wants to provide for you, all your loved ones wants to provide for you, and you denying them stops them from feeling the love come from inside out. So stop saying no to the universe. Receive the universe. Receive those mystical gifts that show up at your doorstep every day, and stop looking at where you're not worthy and look at where it's actually a gift to receive.
So many people don't even unwrap those gifts. And that represents complacency at the deepest level, where we have the cognitive dissonance to our own reality. I get a lot of people that are looking for purpose. And my first initial answer is, you really don't know your purpose? You never really researched? And the answer is yes. Many of them haven't. Mm-hmm. They've been so occupied and distracted by the next iPhone, the next instant gratification moment. And that's such a hard drug to get off of, instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
What are your
Completely.
views on instant gratification?
Well, there's so much going on these days. Social media is the most potent drug there out there. There are studies that show when you look to Facebook to get a hit of dopamine.
Yep.
Simon Sinek did a great thing on this I watched recently about how we're always looking for the next like because of the hit of dopamine. It takes discipline to look internally for validation rather than externally. And again, I just want to put myself in that I'm just as guilty as everybody else around this. And it actually has taken discipline to continue to build my own self-esteem through my esteemable acts. So instant gratification is good, and there's a cost. It takes you out of the long-term planning and keeps you into the short-term looking for dopamine. Getting a text message, how often are we just like, I look at our phone and there's no messages, and we're like, oh, no one loves us. Back in the old days, back when I was, a mere slip of a youth, you'd come home and look for your answer machine if it was blinking, but it was once a day compared to the once a minute a lot of us are engaged in.
Yeah. I know there was a study that I saw before that looked at kids in college that were looking at their cell phones. They had cameras inside colleges to scan for that, and that the average was twice per minute.
Yeah.
Twice per minute. If it wasn't looking at the time, it was whatever notification was there or wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, and that's what the world is turning to, where we have this bent down neck bend towards our cell phone. There's actually physical ramifications of our relationship to our cell phones. So, and it's just a practice like everything else. Sit in the discomfort of the quiet, sit in the discomfort of your own isolation, and then engage with who you want to be in that spot.
Right. Now, the other things, conversely from cell phones, is the people that always have headphones on in their own little bubble of reality, listening to music 24/7.
Oh, for sure. And, I've actually noticed in my very unscientific study, there seems to be less of that. It seemed like when the iPhones first came out, the white ubiquitous cords that were everywhere, I actually have noticed less of that. For me personally, I like listening to audiobooks more than music these days, or, reports. But there's really a beauty of listening to the sounds of the world rather than the sounds of electronica.
So those people with the white cords, they went deaf.
Oh, is that what happened? Doesn't surprise me.
A whole new generation of deaf millennials are coming out from those iPhone 2s and 3s.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Okay. They have like 30% hearing loss because they chose to have super high volume for long periods of time with high-pitched music, and they no longer can actually hear the sounds of nature.
Mm.
They're tone deaf to the birds in the background or the crickets.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's true. It's very, very true.
I remember growing up, times where silence meant something. That was my mystical experience. People stopped talking in the house. Even there was a moment, all the crickets, everything stopped before the thunderstorm. People don't hear those natural synchronicities anymore. They don't allow that little micro mystical experience to just come and be a part of your conversation. The seen world is here, but the unseen world is equally layered into our experience. It is just awareness. And beginning to train our awareness is our own process. Prayer is one of those things that creates a connection, a friendship to those in the unseen world. What is your view about prayer?
I think prayer is amazing, and you have to find what that means for you. Growing up, prayer for me was my Jewish heritage. And I really broke from the Jewish heritage really because of the connotation around wealth. I grew up in the upper middle class in Long Island, New York. And, the most religious experience for a young man was his bar mitzvah, or for a girl was her bat mitzvah. And what I saw about those was it was more about the party than the migration or the coming of to be a man. And so I had a negative connotation around prayer and religion. Then I realized I was spending a lot of time talking to myself. especially to psych myself up for an experience or to soothe myself, there was actually a lot of self-conversation going on where I was talking, to myself, and then I had a feeling, a flavor that there was some greater other being inside of me that I was having a conversation with. And so that's my form of prayer, is talking and listening to those little voices. Now in my experience of hearing deeply, those little voices are talking to me constantly of how to behave and what to say. And some things will come out of me when I'm teaching or when I'm coaching, and I'm like, wait, that wasn't me who came up with that concept. That was good. That was my muse. That was, some mystical thing. And so the ability to talk to oneself and talk to your higher power of your choosing, whoever that is, I think is a really powerful thing. If we're not silent, if we're muted, if we're isolated, then we can't hear those tender voices that want to be heard.
Exactly. And there are times where we have to just let it out loud. That's why I do an out loud, name it to claim it system. Because once you identify what it is and claim your energy from it, or share your energy with it in equal co-creation, you have an opportunity to expand any moment with your perception and awareness. Now, perception training is greatly assisted by whatever faith and prayer system you use. Faith need no religion. Faith in prayer can be no words or thousand words. It's whatever you want it to be. It is the guiding good intentions. But to go to that next level, you do need to make a relationship with yourself. That conversations that you have with yourself. I remember growing up and having conversations with myself, and my mom would peek around the corner, and what were you doing? Oh, I was playing with my Legos and doing the stories that I heard that she heard me do. For me, that was the expression of the Akashic records that were coming through. It was my natural kidhood. Now, as adults, we don't allow that kidhood through. We don't allow that innocent passion of authenticity through because we've been limited so much. When you are writing or using your voice and having your conversations, you are in that authentic moment where that mystical side of you can give you that next thing that inspires the next wonderful idea. What are some of the mechanisms people can observe within themselves that are self-defeating, lack of self-worth?
I think there's a dialogue that you're going to do this wrong. I think we live in a society of disapproval where pretty much we've been taught from day one that we don't do it. We're not doing it right. You're too short. You're too tall. Your hair's too long. Your hair's too short. You're working too hard. You're not working enough. You're fat. You smell bad. And I think that's based on society's, need to sell us stuff. We live in a commerce-based society. Your ability to push aside those negative thoughts, those self-defeating thoughts, those limiting thoughts, that's the first step. And for that, you need to find your rightness. You need to find that you are right as a human being. You are right as who you are is beautiful. And you're perfect. You're a perfect expression of who you are. And perfection does include the propensity for change and evolution. But you're perfect who you are. And if you can just go, shh, I don't need you negative thoughts. Shh, I don't need you self-limiting thoughts. And go in. Then the voices of your expansion can be heard. And you can have a bigger impact in the world.
Yeah. Being able to shh one of those voices is vitally important. That's claiming the power of the moment to be potently present. And when we have the power to shh a voice, we have that power to expand and allow passion and creativity in. Now, I experience a lot of people who I have what I call wet wood syndrome. Their passion spark is smoldering, but their wood is wet. And they really have to create a lot of energy to get forward motion going in their lives. As a business coach and a life coach, what is one of those things that can help engage people's passion to burn hotter?
Well, the first thing is people feel overwhelmed by their desire, and they tend to look at things in very big pictures. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to double my business size. I want to have a loving marriage and have kids. We look at things as very big end goal, and then it's sort of like it's so daunting that we we used to say, oh, I'm never going to get it anyway. Why bother? There's a lot of why bother going on in society today. When I work with people on my business side, what I do is I break down their goals into very small, successful steps, or steps that can be successful. So, if you want to increase your revenue, double your revenue, the first thing I'll do is I'll say, okay, what are you selling? What are your products? How much energy are you putting to produce how much products? Can you leverage that? Can you, and we break things down into small, manageable steps where it's like one step to the result. We break it down to 100 steps, and then we create a timeline that's doable. It's sort of like one of those yoga poses where your leg is burning and you're shaking, but you're not ripping anything. I put people in those poses so they feel themselves expanding. It's hard, but it's not impossible, and certainly not detrimental. So if you want to get to a goal, the first thing to do is to break it down into milestones. An interesting thing I learned is that the brain doesn't know the difference between a small win, like taking out the garbage, and a big win, like winning the Nobel Peace Prize. From a biological response, it's the same biology of a small win. Success begets more success. If you can break down your big project into little steps and just take one step and then the next step and the next step, and then, like I said, have an accountability coach or a friend or a Facebook to keep you on the path, that's how people can migrate from where they are to where they want to get to.
Accountability, accountability, accountability. That is such a chief experience that people are not taught at a young age. Raising children to teach them accountability is tough, especially in this modern society. What do you have for parents out there that are trying to teach accountability to children?
Well, that's a rough one. The first thing is Morgan introduced me to something called hand-in-hand parenting, which is something that has affected my entire life. Hand-in-hand parenting, which you can look up and find, is a way where instead of shunning or telling a kid to push down or squash their emotions, to have the proverbial timeout, hand-in-hand parenting actually encourages the kid to emote all his or her feelings so it doesn't get locked up. So that's the first thing, is let your child be who they are. Now, sometimes you have to have containers, like you don't want to do that in a restaurant or a supermarket, but I watch Morgan sit with her kids for hours and listen to their feelings, which is increasing their chances to have emotions and feel right about their emotions. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's helicopter parenting, which is you're watching your kid do absolutely everything out of fear. Well, guess what? Your kid is going to feel your fear. They're not going to feel your loving presence and attention. They're going to feel your fear. So just notice if you're hovering and not letting them be who they are. The third thing really is, and what I've learned, is to notice where your story, me as a parent, as learning to be a co-parent, notice where my story is invading the children. So, like, I was taught with a certain level of discipline and honor towards parents, and there was value for me, and there was detriment to me around that. But notice where my story, I'm projecting my story onto the kids. So in doing so, you actually allow the child to be who they truly are. Maybe they don't want to be a football player. Maybe they want to be a tomboy. Maybe they don't want to be a scientist or a doctor. Give them permission to be who they are. When you give a kid permission to who they are while still advising them on the path, then you actually can have a healthy, clean relationship, and your desire for them to succeed, they'll receive it much easier.
Helping them and assisting them on the path. Parents are facilitators, not imprinters. But we are brought up in an imprint-based world, whether it's commercial imprinting, whether it's parental imprinting, patriotic imprinting. The world is this myriad of imprints that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And getting at the root of imprinting, like example, a parent imprinting their story onto a child, 30 years later, what is the detriment to that?
Mm-hmm.
And here is where trauma release is so vitally important. It is the body that stores the trauma of the imprint that never allowed the child to explore who they were. Sometimes the child just needed a year to figure out who they were going to be, but you just kept imprinting over and over and over again until they never knew who they were going to be until they graduated college and said, I never wanted to do this degree. We see this over and over, people leading unfulfilled lives and then trying to change it 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. And they believe that the job is unsurmountable. They can never do it because they don't value themselves in that moment. They haven't made enough moments sacred. They haven't had enough personal conversations with themselves to engage that passion at the next level, to say, I truly want to change who I am. And it starts in this moment of now by flipping the frequency of what is shame, what is blame, what is guilt, and whatever subcategory of those that are affecting you. Flipping this frequency to positive, passionate, potent presence within yourself who's ready to go forward and make changes in their lives and other lives. You, Robert, you've chose to be a people changer, one at the level of having the podcast. What is your suggestion for those out there that want to have their podcast? What's the type of message you'd like to impart to those?
Well, the first thing is I love podcasting, and I've fallen deeply, deeply in love with it. I actually went to a podcast conference about a month ago, and I was just amazed by the there was no one demographic. There was such a range of different types of people all speaking their voices. I mean, podcasts are amazing because you can put your voice out there in the world relatively easy today in terms of technology to do. And I think it's important. So I do my podcast not for the numbers, not for the results, not for the clients. Those have come. I do it because I have something inside of me that needs to be said. There's a part of me that doesn't feel complete unless I'm speaking my message to create a positive impact for people. The second thing is I actually did a podcast on how to do a podcast. So if you go to my website, there's actually the emotional side and the technical side. So if you want to do a podcast, that resource is there for you. And the last thing I'll say is what you have to say is important, like really, really important. And you never know who is suffering from them believing they're the only person with their reality. If you come and do a podcast and give them comfort, then this terminal uniqueness, this isolation can be relieved very quickly.
I like that word, terminal uniqueness.
Terminal uniqueness.
Yeah,
we all think, I'm the only person that has this. No.
Nope. Terminal uniqueness. I love getting those conjunctions of words that really stop people and make them think. It is where we as podcasters and word crafters and writers can really make you think. I put together some of my own, tongue twisters of potent presence, and all that other stuff. But when you're at that high level of creativity, you will come up with a phrase that can go viral. In my expression in 2013, I went from having a small radio show to it being gigantic, being hundreds of thousands of downloads daily over multiple networks, and then having to start a business out of it. That was my creation. I was one show away from that. Each person that goes out there has to see themselves. You're always one conversation away from actually going viral and engaging people on a different level. When you allow that authentic you out in the microphone, engaging people authentically with yourself because they're coming there for you. Why? Because they can't do it themselves. They're looking for motivation, inspiration, something to fill that void. They are a hermit, but they hear our voices. And for those that are hermits out there, it's okay. Start the forgiving process. Start the passionate, engaging process. Begin to chant, to chronicle who you are and hold something accountable in yourself. Get out once a day. Drive someplace new. Go someplace and talk to someone. Do something other than engaging people through the anonymity of the internet.
100%. Just do something different. And, bluntly, this is a little tough love. Stop whining.
Yeah.
People, just stop whining. Whining doesn't get you anywhere. Self-flagellation doesn't get you anywhere. Complaining doesn't get you anywhere. Complaining sometimes reinforces the negative belief you have about yourself. Don't gossip. if you have charge with someone, confront them, or ask if they want to have a conversation. Part of the stasis is our own self-belief that we can't have the life we want, and we use whining as a very legal way to stay in our own pool of garbage, our own pool of bullshit. So take the steps. If you're unhappy with your life, take one small step towards a life you want to lead.
Outstanding. I like calling this arguing for your limitations. And
That's
people
good.
have PhDs, doctorals in arguing for their limitations. You can say, why haven't you done this? And there's a litany of things preordained to say why you can't do that. Okay? So for all those hermits out there, why haven't you gone and made a friend today? And what's your response to that? Probably 30 pages. My advice is write all of those arguing for limitations down. Truly put yourself in a triggered scenario and so that your preordained arguments come forward. What was part of you having to challenge those arguing for limitations so you could get out there and be public?
Well, I had a very interesting piece of the puzzle. So I started this journey when I was 28. I met this very powerful woman named Nicole. We created One Taste together, and she was the front person, and I was the man behind the curtain. I was the doer, the guy behind the woman. And she called herself founder, not co-founder, founder. And I put up with that. I put up with that. And then, I got out of One Taste, and 6 months later, I felt bored, and I created a business in Los Angeles called LA Mother that ultimately failed. And I created the same scenario with a woman in front of me, and I was the guy behind the woman because that's where I felt comfortable. And then that business went total disaster, basically. And then at the end of 2016, a mere 10 months ago or 9 months ago, I did a journey. I did a plant medicine journey, and I saw how I was hiring these women, quote, hiring these women to stand in front of me because I was afraid of being the man speaking. And so my podcast numbers were like very low, like 400 a month, 500 a month. And all of a sudden, when I had this realization that I was hiding from the world, and it was time for me to stand up and say, my name is Rob Kandell. I have something important to say. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to put this book together. That's where I decided to do the book. My whole world shifted. My business expanded. My numbers are now 8,000 downloads a month, from 500 at the end of 2016 to 8,000, which is not a huge number compared to some podcasters, but it's big for me.
Right.
And it was really just my decision to step forward and say, I'm going to take the heat of being the front man. I'm going to take the heat of being polarizing. I'm going to be the heat. I'm going to invite the haters to hate, and I'm going to invite the lovers to love. And that choice changed my entire life, which I'm so grateful for that journey. I'm so grateful for Morgan, standing next to me and saying, you do have something to say. My friends and colleagues saying, please write the book. We need you to write the book. And for me saying yes to them, but mainly yes to myself, to stand in the limelight and say, okay, it's time. And my whole world has shifted this year. It's been an amazing change.
So let's talk about plant medicine. Now, that's one that's been on my process. I've talked with many people that have come on the show as well as callers. What is your view on the plant medicine and how it can apply to the greater public?
Well, the first thing is please do plant medicine when your soul says yes to it. This is not recreation. This is not something to take lightly. Please don't do it because I said or someone else said. Listen to your own heart. I learned about ayahuasca in what year was it? It was 2007. I heard about it in 2007, and I didn't try it until 2015 because even though I knew about it, my soul wasn't ready for it. My relationship to it, I've been journeying with practice shamans for 2 years, has been life-changing. It is an amazing experience to bring different parts of myself out. I've had really profound experiences. I walk in with an intention, and the intention gets founded. My shamans have been amazing in supporting me. My journeys with Morgan have brought us deeper and closer to be in journey space. I've revealed some really shameful parts of myself on journeys. My relationship to porn My 46-year relationship to porn, I never talked to anyone about until Morgan. All these things gave me the permission. So I am a huge proponent to do it wisely. Be careful to if you might to use an escape, avoid that. The process of journeying can be addicting, mentally addicting, if not physically addicting. Please be careful. And if done consciously, if done mindfully, if done with a shaman who knows what they're doing, it can be totally life-changing.
And I agree, totally life-changing. But it must be something that you hold sacred. And this is one of my fundamental teachings. It's called conscious application of the sacred. When you're dealing with any kind of medicine, even the medicines of the doctors, your conscious application of the sacred should be in there. Your fullness of your focus, your intent, your potent, your presency, so that you can process what is there. Whether it's prescription or plant medicine, every aspect of something that's going through your alchemical process of awareness, taking medicines in, also means medicines go out. So there
Completely.
are ways to learn about yourself that can engage the higher spirit. So some of those things, ayahuasca, iboga, mushrooms, cannabis, all of those things are there naturally in this world. Cannabis, THC, you naturally produce it in your body. We naturally produce DMT in our bodies. Okay? Those plant medicines that are there are unique frequency-based teachers. And when you become a signature frequency match for that teaching, by consuming that, you go through a purging. An ayahuasca purging is where much of what you never want to see comes up, or the majority of it, or all of it. And in that purging process, you can feel pristine again. A new form of pureness that is the ultimate of love without strings attached, as well as love that's not used as a weapon. I will retract my love because you didn't do what I said. Conditional-based love that has consequences in the future. And in ayahuasca and many medicines, you experience that love without a future consequence potential behind it if you should do something it doesn't agree with.
That describes a lot of my experience. It's been an incredible teacher. The purging, the noticing, the awareness. Just so grateful for, all the work that's been done before me by the shamans and how they've totally positively impacted my life.
Yeah. They've charted the course to the unseen world. The purging, whatever it comes up, whatever the process is your personal experience. There are those out there that want to share that personal experience. You know that from the journey itself. I had my journey begin at 9 years old at a baseball stadium, and it still goes on and on with more sub-journeys and journeys within it. As we learn to begin how to be multidimensional, how to be multifunctional, how to not have shells that limit us, or to have egoic tools that make bombastic parts of our personality behind closed doors, but make us meek in front of people. Learning that we are not living in a duality, but we are a singularity of an awake and a dreaming being. We can be lucid at any moment out of choice. Meditation and yoga shows the lucid aspects of high theta to low delta. Anyone could achieve it without the body paralysis that's going on. So in your greater view, how is the yoga, body exercise, and self-motivation going to interact with those that really want to engage the passionate process of being themselves?
I think it's paramount, the mind-body connection. For me, my self-esteem is mixed in with my body image and also my health and what I'm eating, the supplements that I take, the inflammation that we're discovering in my body. It's all part of this process of body awareness. If you don't have a healthy vehicle, whatever that means to you, then it's hard to live your purpose in the world. And for me, it's been a constant stake of finding out what makes me tick and how to be as healthy as possible.
Outstanding. So Rob, you're going to be at the event October 5th through 8th speaking. So what are you going to be speaking about at the event?
I'm going to come up with a pragmatic way to live the authentic life. I riffed off your title, Living the Mystical Life. I'm going to do pragmatic ways to live the authentic life. And it's really some specific practices of how to go from this hidden, inauthentic way of hiding behind our social media profiles to being more authentic. And I hope as after my talk and the Q&A and our time together, people will come home with some specific tools how to change the format of their relationships, their romantic and business and personal relationships, so they can live more of an authentic life.
Outstanding. So we're going to take our first caller. Let's see, Robert, the other Robert. We have callers? Yes, we do.
First caller will be Dawn.
Dawn, are you there? Dawn, are you there? Going once. Going twice.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm here in the...
Just a second here. We're having a bit of a gremlin background today. There we go. Dawn, are you there? Nope, cannot hear her. We're having a little trouble with the conference room. All right, we'll come back. So next caller. Gregors, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And at start, I want to really thank you, Andrew and Robert, for your amazing conversation. You bring a lot of light to that, and you start some great topics, how to bring back the true powers. I'm struggling a lot with that. I had 1 year ago crazy ink strike awakening, and my girlfriend commit suicide, and this trigger my DNA in some way. I go through a lot of pain and suffer, and still I'm going through that process. And I more you explain me a lot, and I grasping the main point is discipline ourselves. And I go through ayahuasca recently, through the mushrooms, and it's helping me, but still I have problem to expressing myself and to just putting my inner knowledge to the world. And I don't know if how much I need to change in myself, I am so alien for other peoples in some way, and it's hard to me to find the people who I resonate with the things that I have to say. So I locking myself down, and I am even going in the mode I stop speaking in some way, don't want to express myself. And I was through this last year when my awakening started. I had encounter couple times by non-human beings, and I was in Sedona on channeling from Prime Creator. I get back from there. I get the message how to maintain and what I should do with my life and etc. And when I came back, the FBI agents, they stood in front of my home, and they want to asking crazy question who I am and something like that. And for me it was crazy. I couldn't feel any energy from them. And I just say to them, like, it's not your business in some way, but I was so scared. But they didn't even act like humans in some way, like zero emotion, zero energy. And I know, like, I have like hard times in some way. And thank you very much for like sharing all this amazing knowledge so I can grasp and learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gregor. Getting to learn from these shows where you can just sit back and listen, like when Rob and I are talking, so you can apply something to the greater you. It's important. Rob, what do you have to add to Gregor?
Well, it sounds like you have a lot of trauma, my friend. You sound like you've had some rough experiences, the death of a friend, some of your own imbalanced experiences. And so in your isolation, in your self-defeating way, you're silencing yourself. It feels like, you're increasing the story of your separation or distance from others. And so I would seek an ally of some form where you can start to reveal part of yourself so you don't feel so isolated. Maybe that's a therapist, maybe that's another friend, maybe that's a men's group. I'm not exactly sure. But you need to come out of this viewpoint that you're different and wrong and start to believe that you are a right human being and you deserve all the connection you want in the world.
Exactly. Thank you so much, caller.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next caller.
Back to Dawn again?
Dawn, are you there today?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dawn. How you doing
Can you hear
today?
me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yes. Okay, great.
So what question did you have for me and Rob today?
Oh, well, actually, I'm just wondering in general kind of about unity consciousness, and if when you're in unity consciousness, is it possible that you would attract sociopaths because of your energy, like being an opposite polarity or something like that?
So in unity, there is no opposite polarity. Everything's accepted equally. And there's a common misconception about what unity consciousness is and isn't. For you as existing right now, there is an aspect of you that's already in unity consciousness, but you as this being do not have it as an experience. And as long as you don't have it as an experience, it still falls under the law of expectation. And this is where many negative frequencies can come up around unity consciousness, because it can create a hole in your perception in which we can become complacent that because we believe that in a unity frequency that everyone else is going to be nice in unity too, when in fact there's something using that against you to project through that hole in your auric frequency, which is your own belief that everyone is in unity, when in fact we are not. We are in a soup of disunity. We are in the state of separation of densities, those who are ready to accept unity and the potentialities that it offers as holding the mantle of self-responsibility of what you need to grow in yourself, what you need to be passionate by, how you enforce your own reality rules, seen and unseen, knowing who you are exchanging energy with seen and unseen, who you are interacting with intimately and socially, and are they doing their own work on their own selves so that they do not create this dirty energy underwear environment that we have where we are not in unity, we are in disunity. And it's deeply, many light workers must admit we are not in unity in any way, shape, or form as a species. Look how the way we treat animals or people of our own kind in third worlds. We have laws that act as mediaries before health and wellness goes to those that are injured on the other side of the world. That's disunity in all of its different frequencies. So, for you, caller, the great thing here to understand is admitting you're in disunity and what can you grow in your own rules, borders, policies, and procedures, seen and unseen, so those that are already in unity are attracted to you individually, and that there's no subtle emanation in you that allows abuse to go on.
Okay, it'll take a little while to digest all that.
Yeah. So, Rob, what did you have to add about the unity frequency and how a lot of people see it as a cultural acceptance?
I quite honestly don't know a great deal about this specific terminology, though listening to you, I got a flavor of it. The thing I would say in response to the question is if you fear attracting sociopaths, you'll attract sociopaths. It's what you put out there. It's the energy you put out there. And to have faith and awareness. I'm not saying if you're always going to get what you want, but what you put out there, the universe provides. And if you're willing to look at your motivations and your fears and work through your motivations and fear to find the clearest, crispest desire, I think that's what you're going to magnetize into your world.
Okay, thank you.
All right, caller, thanks a lot. All right, Robert, this has been an outstanding show. So give people your website so they can get a hold of you.
Yes, my website is toughlove.live. That's TUFF love.live. The greatest gift you can give me at this point is just to support my Indiegogo campaign for my book proposal. You can find that at toughlove.live/unhidden. But if you're not interested in that, my access to my podcast, my writing, my videos, all can be found at toughlove.live.
And you will be at the event giving a speech October 5th through 8th. I look forward to that. For everyone that's going to be at the event, I look forward to giving you all a great big hug. So October 5th through the 8th, if you want to get last-minute tickets, contact hr@galactichistorian.com, as well as you can go onto the website and buy the entire 6-week course and get 2 free tickets to come to the event also. So this coming Saturday, we'll be having a special show. So we'll be off from Saturday till next Thursday during the event. So all those people that are wanting live shows, we're going to be off for the next 3 shows, but we are going to be having special shows that I've created with Andre Hodge, Servant of Truth. We're going to be keeping the material coming. We're going to be doing 156 live shows next year. So everyone get ready as the train is rolling. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. Honor being here with you.